Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Tensions escalate in India and Pakistan after India launches missile strikes in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. 133 cardinals from around the world will begin casting their vote for a new pope in the largest ever conclave. And US and Chinese officials are set to start talks this week in a bid to de-escalate a trade war between the world's two biggest economies. To our top story, Pakistan says 26 people have been killed and 46 injured in Indian airstrikes that hit sites across Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. India launched the attacks overnight and said at least 10 civilians were killed by Pakistani shelling on its side of the de facto border. For more on this, I'm joined by international journalist and broadcaster Inzamam Rashid. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you on the show. So, Inzamam, if we just have a look, what are the latest developments on this story?
Look, it's been another pretty crazy 24 hours on the border between India and Pakistan. We are probably what you could call it in the fog of war, very early stages. But this isn't uncharted territory for these two nations. Overnight, India launched what was seen about a 25 or 30-minute rocket attack across Pakistan, inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir, but also in the country of Pakistan as well. And it was an assault which Pakistan called a blatant act of war. India said that it struck 9 sites that they said were terrorist locations, that they believed were housing terrorists or were organised areas where terrorist activity was taking place. And as a result, Pakistan then carried out further attacks against India as a result of their attacks overnight.
So tensions have been escalating for weeks ahead of this morning's attacks. Talk us through what has led to the latest strikes by India on Pakistan.
Well, notwithstanding the decades of hostility that's going on between these two nations, the latest events have kind of centred around an attack that took place on the 22nd of April, so just days away. And this was basically an attack from a terrorist organisation in Pakistan towards tourists in an area of Balgam in India. Now, India say that 26 people were killed during that attack. They say that women, that children were also at the centre of that attack, tourists as well. And there was a fair bit of bloodshed on the 22nd of April. Now, those attacks that were carried out by the terrorist organisation have been identified as an organisation which is called the Kashmir Resistance. And they have basically said that, yes, it was us who carried out that attack. As a result of that, India were always going to respond. And last night was the night where they carried out their attacks, killing what Pakistan say was 26 people, including women and children. They say dozens more have been injured as a result. But Pakistan were going to stop there all day today. They've been saying that we will retaliate. They say that they in turn shot down 5 army jets, 5 Indian army jets in India, which they see is a huge victory. And what they say in return is that 10 people have reportedly been killed on the Indian side as well. So quite a lot of death that's occurred in the last 24 hours in retaliation to what happened a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely. And the conflict is really centering around Kashmir. Why is this land disputed over?
I mean, this all goes back to 1947 when India and Pakistan split countries. They are partitioned when the British colony left. And since then, there has been huge tensions between these two nations over this bit of land up in the north of these two countries. And there has been several wars since, I think probably about 6 major wars, and then flare-ups like we've seen over the last 24 hours. And I think probably the latest conflict is probably the worst we have ever seen, and tensions are probably higher than ever before. I've covered this story many times, both in Pakistan and on the India side as well, and I've seen tensions from both sides. But I think just looking at some of the stories that are coming out of India and Pakistan, a lot which is very difficult to verify and to really attribute anything to. But I think right now, in terms of tension, it's probably the highest that those two nations have ever seen.
And I think that's what a lot of countries are warning against right now, that escalation. But I want to say, Inzamam, you're actually going to stay with me. So thank you so much for that. And we'll be back with you just shortly. We can now speak to Jan Achakzai, former information minister of Baluchistan in Pakistan and geopolitical analyst. Jan, I want to thank you so much for joining the show. It's really great to have you on. Pakistan is vowing to respond to the latest strikes from India. Is this a clear escalation? And what can we expect Pakistan to do in the next few days?
I think Pakistan is already high up the escalation ladder. Pakistan believes that its response to the first Indian attack was a defensive. It was reacting to particularly the aerial attacks that we have seen, and Pakistan says that around 5 aircraft of India have been downed, including their human vehicles like the drones. So what we see is escalation dominance by Pakistan probably in the next 24 hours. That implies Pakistan would resort to reprisal attacks, probably targeting hinterland of India, as Pakistan has taken the cue when the India attacked its mainland cities, particularly Bhavalpur, which is not in occupied in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, and also Pindi, one of the main cities where it has an impact. So I think Pakistan will go for some infrastructure attacks within India's hinterland.
India points the finger of blame at Pakistan for what happened in Kashmir in the region in April because of the accusations against Pakistan for backing, funding and giving sanctuary to terrorist organizations. What is your reaction to this?
Well, I think it's more a fictional narrative that India has adopted, given the fact that it was not prepared to share evidence with any country, whether it's its own friendly countries like the US and even the UN. So there is no transparent investigation into the allegation of Indians' claim linking Pakistan with the terrorist attack in Indian-occupied Kashmir. But what we have seen is Indian hegemonic attitude in South Asia. It's a typical copying and borrowing from the playbook of Israel we have seen in Gaza. So this is why we believe, that the overwhelming thinking in Pakistan is that India is believe in some sort of territorial expansion, civilization expansion, and its extremism, which is Hindu extremism called Hindutva, is basically, it really believes that the whole South Asia is part of the Akhand Bharat idea. So this is why Pakistan believes that hegemony is being asserted by India, so Pakistan has to face an hegemonic India. This is why Pakistan will establish deterrence after the first attack by India last night.
Are you saying that, in your mind, India wants to take over Kashmir completely? Is that what the thinking right now in Pakistan is?
Well, India does not believe Pakistan's 32% of borders. So they claim Pakistan's almost 32% of the borders. So really, Pakistan believes that the strategic threat emanates from India. And given its relations that have gone sour with not only Pakistan, but Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and all the neighbors that India has, the only playbook that India want to use it is to browbeat its small neighbors, where it has an overwhelming size in terms of military, in terms of economy and other areas, 10 times these small neighbors, including Pakistan. So this is why the threat cannot be from Pakistan to a 10 times bigger country called India, which really believe that it's an emerging third power after China and America in this part of the world.
These are two nuclear nations. Who holds the largest arsenal? And if they go to all-out war, what purpose does this serve either country?
Well, I think this is for the bigger country, particularly like India, to ponder upon any aggression against Pakistan linked with its domestic political campaigning, which we are saying it in Bihar, attacking Pakistan. Whenever we have this sort of incidents, we have seen a pattern. After several weeks or months, we have seen some political campaigning within India. So the domestic politics has led India to externalize its issues against Pakistan, and also the latest incident of holding this water treaty in abeyance is particularly an act of war. And last night's aggression against Pakistan was also an act of war against what Pakistan believes is a sovereign country and its territorial integrity. This is why it's not a two-way street. It's not the two sides. It's just one side against Islamophobic hegemonic country called India, which is 10 times of its size of Pakistan. And its military budget is the third largest after China and America, which Pakistan has to face.
Pakistan is on the cusp of getting a massive loan bailout from the IMF. Does this escalation complicate things further for the economy in Pakistan right now?
Well, I think IMF has already cleared that their template is not linked to geopolitical tension between Pakistan and India. India also, as an act of optics, wrote a letter to IMF asking not to sanction the loan to Pakistan. But the IMF clarified that we believe on the economic, steps that Pakistan has taken according to the IMF conditionalities. So I don't think that IMF decisions will be impacted by the tension between the two countries. However, the world needs to understand that any nuclear exchange in this part of the world will jeopardize the peace of not only this part of the world, but the whole world.
World leaders are calling for rising tensions to de-escalate and for both sides to protect civilians. Will this be enough to encourage both sides to take steps to find common ground on this? And what's your reaction to their calls for calm? Does Pakistan want to de-escalate?
Well, I think Pakistan was within its right when it said that let's have a transparent investigation into the allegations against Pakistan in Indian occupied Kashmir, and India did not buy that proposal, where it was enforced by the UN, by the US, and all the allies of the India, where it did not condemn Pakistan for the allegations linking Pakistan's hand in this incident in Kashmir. So what happened was that India unilaterally attacked Pakistan last night. As a result, Pakistan is left with no option but to ensure to establish its deterrence against overwhelming force of India. So I think the next step that Pakistan is about to take will simply ensure that India would not, next time browbeat Pakistan through mere allegations, because we have seen this pattern, and in future, India would think twice before attacking Pakistan without any concrete proof of its involvement against any terrorist incident in India. So I think this is why Pakistan's narrative and Pakistan's right is within the UN to safeguard its territorial integrity and its independence.
Leigh-Ann Achakzai, former information minister of Balochistan in Pakistan and geopolitical analyst. Great to have your views. I appreciate you joining me. Now we can go to New Delhi to speak to retired Commodore Chitrapu Uday Bhaskar, director at the Society for Policy Studies in New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, India has said this is retaliation for the attack in Indian-administered Kashmir a few weeks ago. What message do these attacks now send to Pakistan?
India had a very clear message to convey after the terror attack of April 22 in Pahalgam, which is to say that the perpetrators would be punished and those who have enabled and supported such terror attacks against India would also be dealt with in a very firm and resolute manner. Along with this, Indian intelligence agencies had also picked up information which indicated that there were plans for another strike against India. So this particular operation, which has been called Operation Sindoor, was a combination of political resolve that terror attacks would be punished and that the perpetrators would also be identified, and concurrently a message of restraint saying that India did not wish to escalate this, which is why they made it very clear that no military assets were targeted and that the 9 locations were all linked with the terror infrastructure that has been nurtured in Pakistan over the last 2 or 3 decades. So that was the limited message that India was conveying.
So earlier I was speaking to the former information minister of Balochistan in Pakistan, and he was saying to me the actions that were taken by India with these latest strikes was a clear act of war. Now, would you agree with that statement?
I would not agree with that. This is not an act of war. This is a response to a very brutal terror attack. Just to recall very briefly, on April 22nd, 26 innocent tourists were gunned down when they were on a holiday, and many of them were asked to identify what their religion was. And if the answer was not acceptable to the people wielding the gun, they were killed. There was nothing more brutal. So for India, a response was inevitable. And the target was not Pakistan. It was not the people of Pakistan. It was the perpetrators, the terrorists, and their handlers. So to that extent, I would say this was not a war, but a counter-terror operation with a limited objective. And which is why, along with the military strike, there was a politico-diplomatic message that this is not aimed as a conventional war against Pakistan.
Pakistan has rejected claims by India that it houses terrorist camps on its soil. It says the allegations are baseless and there's no evidence. What is your reaction to this, and what concrete proof do you have?
As a security analyst who's been studying this issue for almost 30 years, the first observation I'd make is that for all the professionals who are dealing with either terrorism as a phenomenon or South Asia, there is chapter and verse by academics, analysts, and retired diplomats about the way in which terror has been nurtured in Pakistan, and there has been a fair amount of documentation which has also been made available to the United Nations. For purposes of recall, in 2019, India was subjected to another terror attack. And at that time, India had provided necessary evidence at the United Nations Security Council. And all the member countries were agreed that Pakistan should desist, including China, which after a few days of being ambivalent, went along with the consensus. So India has a very simple message to convey to the world, which Prime Minister Modi has said repeatedly, that terrorism cannot be condoned. And today, when the Pahalgam attack took place, India has made the same message. And whenever India has tried to invite Pakistan to be part of the investigation, Pakistan did not come with the kind of sincerity and integrity that was expected. This happened to India in 2016. And there was yet another terror attack in a place called Puri. So based on all these experiences, I would say that professional consensus is that Pakistan, for its own domestic reasons, has invested in nurturing terror groups. And now the Pakistani army in particular is finding it very difficult to wean itself away from this kind of a proxy war that it is waging against India. And let me add in parentheses, against Afghanistan also. There is a lot of dismay in Afghanistan about a similar pattern. So I'm afraid Pakistan's stand, or the way in which Pakistan is trying to project itself, is not something that most of the global community would agree with.
What military action can we expect to see from India in the coming days?
From the Indian side, I would say that the message has been conveyed that if there is a terror strike of this nature, India will respond against the perpetrators and those who have supported it. India does not want to escalate. If there is any escalation, I would say that perhaps that choice will have to be made by Pakistan. Some very intemperate references have been made in Pakistan about the price they would make India pay. India is monitoring the situation. The security forces are prepared for exigencies. Personally, I would say I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, there definitely would be a certain level of military escalation, as I see it, along the conventional ladder at this point in time.
In your view, where does the future of Kashmir lie if this conflict does continue to escalate?
You know, Kashmir's future is totally integrated with India. In 2019, a political decision was taken, and the status of Kashmir has been changed. It is now a union territory of India, fully integrated, and most recently, with normalcy having returned, which is to say that the fear of the gun had abated, terrorism had been brought under control. Tourism is the main industry and employment for the people of Kashmir, the citizens of Kashmir. And over the last year, the number of tourists who visited the region reached a record high. So this particular Pahalgam attack is something that has set the clock back for tourism. And the citizens of Kashmir are incensed. They're very angry. For the first time I have seen in 30 years, the citizens of Kashmir are united against terror. This was not always the case. So the future that I see is that terrorism has to be resisted. It has to be removed from within Kashmir, sent back across the border, and the Kashmiri citizens of India will find their own levels of confidence, competence, and I hope long-term peace.
World leaders are calling for calm amid rising tensions. What do you say to the likes of Donald Trump, who said he wants it to end quickly? Does India want to de-escalate?
As I said, India does not want to escalate. So the subtext is that India would like this to be closed as a chapter if the message is conveyed. Certain off-ramp options are possible. The concern of the global community has been conveyed in different ways. And I think if Pakistan could send its own signal that it would desist and stop providing the kind of support to terror camps and terror leaders as it has in the past, I think not just India, the whole world would be very relieved to know that a nuclear armed state like Pakistan is distancing itself from terrorism.
Commodore retired Chitrapu Uday Bhaskar. It was great to have you on the show and your thoughts were much appreciated. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's come back to international journalist and broadcaster Inzamam Rashid. There we are. So we heard from the Pakistan side and the Indian side. What were your main takeaways?
I think the biggest point there is the question which you asked both sides, Leigh-Ann, and that was whether both nations actually wanted to see de-escalation. Now, the Pakistani representative didn't outright say that Pakistan wants de-escalation, and the retired Commodore there saying that he didn't actually say, he said that India doesn't want to escalate. So it's where are both sides at the minute? Who needs to de-escalate and who doesn't want to escalate? And I think that's a really important point, because this is at a point where these two nations have been at war for many, many years now. And right now we are probably seeing the highest tensions between these two countries. And the word from the rest of the world is de-escalate, is show restraint, and is move to dialogue and diplomacy. Whether they actually get to that point is so hard to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just have a quick look at Trump and Starmer talking about that quickly. Just take a listen.
Rising tensions between India and Pakistan will be of serious concern for many across Britain. We are engaging urgently with both countries, as well as other international partners, encouraging dialogue, de-escalation, and the protection of civilians.
No, it's a shame. We just heard about it, just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. You know, they've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
There we are, Inzamam. So we heard from Starmer and Donald Trump. What are world leaders saying about this? I know Donald Trump there said this has been happening for decades, something that, of course, you know, as mentioned by both of our guests.
Yeah, and I think he alluded to there as well, the president, that this happens quite regularly, these flare-ups, and that he hopes it does end pretty quickly. I think when you look at other world leaders, in particular, Keir Starmer's predecessor, Rishi Sunak, he said that no nation should have to accept terrorist attacks being launched against it from land controlled by another country. India's justified in striking terrorist infrastructure. There can be no impunity for terrorists. So a tweet that kind of sides alongside India and, of course, where his family is from. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, what I found quite interesting in his statement, he said the world cannot afford a military confrontation between India and Pakistan, obviously alluding to the situation that's taking place in the Middle East and, of course, between Russia and Ukraine, basically asking for restraint and de-escalation. We do not want a third major war happening across the world. And I think what's important to note as well, Leigh-Ann, is what Israel's take on this is, and they have clearly sided with India, saying that India has its right to defend itself.
And I think the next few days are going to be a real important coming hours, I guess, to see what happens.
Yeah, I think the next 24 hours are pretty crucial. And what the Pakistani representative said to you a bit earlier, he said it will be interesting to see what Pakistan does over the next 24 hours. And then it's basically a tit for tat following that. What will India do following Pakistan's response? At the end of the day, this is decades of anger and tension that has essentially turned into violence once again. And what's important is I think the world can't ignore what's going on between India and Pakistan, because at the end of the day, this is two nuclear-armed nations going head-to-head. And I'd probably say the tensions right now are at their worst. The next 24 hours will be crucial, if not critical. And the mistrust that's been going on between these two nations is at an all-time high. Diplomacy is not a word which is being uttered by any of them, and getting them into a room for any sort of peace talks is pretty impossible right now.
Yes, absolutely. Inzamam, Rashid, thank you so much for joining me. Great analysis there. I much appreciate it. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. In his first interview since leaving the White House, former US President Joe Biden accused President Donald Trump of appeasing Russia by pressuring Ukraine to give up its territory. Unlike Trump, Biden said his Ukraine policy provided Kyiv with everything they needed to defend their independence. Some commentators have pointed out Biden's decision to speak out marks a break from the traditional restraint usually observed by former presidents. Russia and Ukraine have launched drone strikes just hours before a three-day ceasefire announced by Russia is due to begin. Zelensky says Russia launched 4 ballistic missiles and 142 drones, whilst Ukraine also attacked Russia with drones. The attacks forced at least 350 flights in Russia to be delayed or either cancelled. Yemen's Houthis say a ceasefire deal between them and the US does not include sparring Israel. They have also suggested that shipping attacks that have disrupted global trade will not come to a complete halt. It comes after President Trump announced the US would stop bombing Houthis in Yemen, saying that the group had agreed to stop attacking US ships. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has met French leader Emmanuel Macron on his first visit to Europe. The leaders discussed a post-war reconstruction and economic cooperation. Now, the Cardinals, who are about to start the process of electing a new pope, are taking an oath of secrecy inside the Sistine Chapel. Once they are closed inside that Sistine Chapel, they will have no communication with the outside world until a new pope is elected, marking the beginning of the conclave. For more on this, I'm joined by Reverend Robert Ghal from the Catholic University of America. Always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you just talk us and everyone through the process that has begun today?
Indeed, the Cardinals are already inside the Sistine Chapel, and it is called a conclave because clave in Latin means key, so they are locked inside this room, and the formal declaration was made extra omnes, everybody out, except for these cardinals who are electors, who have all just made an oath to maintain secrecy during these scrutinies, as they're called, which are each of the ballots that are made during this election. Right now, they are voting, surely, and they'll be counting the votes within a short amount of time. And we should have news by 7 p.m. Rome time as to white or black smoke. White smoke indicates a new pope, and black smoke indicates that he didn't get 2/3 majority. And then they'll start voting again tomorrow.
Oh, so I will be definitely watching the roof of the Sistine Chapel like the rest of the world. But the Dean of the College of Cardinals has said the next leader needs to guide the Church through a complex time. What will the Cardinals right now be prioritizing when they are electing a next Pope?
While the Pope has a very important position within the world, including his role in negotiating peace among countries and establishing policy with respect to his moral authority, as was evident at the funeral of Pope Francis when so many heads of state convened in St. Peter's Basilica. In fact, there's famous photographs that weren't AI produced, but were real of the President Zelensky and President Trump meeting there at the altar of the baptism of Jesus, and apparently coming together in order to succeed in making a negotiation and an agreement. So this indicates that the Pope has moral and political authority across the world. But those cardinals really don't care that much about this right now. What they really care about is that the new Pope may represent St. Peter, who was the first among the apostles, and that he may continue the tradition of the Church, which is our belief in Jesus Christ.
Are there any cardinals who are the clear frontrunners to replace Pope Francis, or is it just too soon to start speculating?
it really, truly is hard to speculate. This is the largest conclave ever in 2,000 years, with 133 cardinal electors inside the Sistine Chapel, 133, more than ever. And in addition to this, what's really complicated about this election is the fact that they don't really know each other that well. So, because many of them, Pope Francis famously chose cardinals from the peripheries. And these cardinals from the peripheries they work in their own countries, their own dioceses. They don't have much of an opportunity at all to speak with one another. So that makes everything very difficult to predict. Nonetheless, media has been speaking very loudly about certain front runners. I suspect that those alleged front runners are being promoted by certain people who remain ensconced in positions of power in the Vatican. But in fact, that power has now been undermined by the death of Francis. So who is really the front runner? It's an amazing group of candidates from all over the world and a great deal of talent. And I think there are many more possible popables, as they say, or papabili, than much of the media has been proclaiming.
Yes, we'll have to wait and see. But why does this election matter to non-Christians?
Well, this is it's amazing how, of course, for Christians, they see the Pope as the Holy Father, as kind of the Father of fathers, and as a shepherd, as a pastor who represents Jesus, and is an effective sign of unity for all Christians, including those who aren't Catholic. But what about those who aren't Christians? Why should they care? Well, in fact, I think that for all people across the world, the Pope represents a religious authority that is universal, is global. And there's no other religion that has a living human being who has and exercises that kind of authority. Moreover, he's a head of state, and his state is recognized by 191 other countries. And therefore, he has a diplomatic corps spread around the world. And whether it's at the United Nations or at the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund or the World Health Organization, the Vatican has representatives. And those representatives act not so much for the interest of politics and state interests, but more for the sake of justice and helping the poor.
So I was just going to ask you something. How long do you predict it will be until we see the historic moment of white smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel chimney? How many days do you think, Reverend?
Over the past 100 years, none have taken more than 4 days. And yet, I think this time it may take more than 4 days. I would guess 5 days, maybe 6. After 3 days, if there's no pope that's been elected with 2/3, they spend up to a full day in prayer and in silence and considering their responsibility and the weight of that responsibility. And then they'll come back to vote again. So I would guess 5 days, but perhaps we'll have a surprise. A big surprise would be if in minutes we could have white smoke.
I said 2 days, you've said 5 days. My producer just said to me in my ear 5 days. So we'll all have to reconnect and see who got it right. But Reverend Robert Ghal from the Catholic University of America, always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and God bless you.
A reminder of our top stories. Tensions escalate in India and Pakistan after India launches missile strikes in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. "133 cardinals from around the world will begin casting their vote for a new pope in the largest ever conclave." And US and Chinese officials are set to start talks this week in a bid to de-escalate a trade war between the world's two biggest economies. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours with a W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.